Welcome to another episode of Tapped in Sports. It's your host again, Leo Luna, and I'm joined here with Akash Anavarathan and a special guest of the Fourth and Nine blog over there. We're just going to go ahead and wait for more people to tune in here. I want to make sure that it goes onto Twitter Live as well. So we're just going to go ahead and give it a couple minutes, make sure everything's synced up correctly. In the meantime, feel free to throw down comments, and we look forward to answering any questions that you guys have today. Once again, we're going to start the show shortly here, just making sure everything is tuned in with Twitter as we're going on Twitter Live as well. Went ahead and tweeted something out. I'm not sure if that's exactly going live.
Oop, I see it.
Is it showing live?
Yep, it is.
Perfect. Hey, Nick. Go Niners. Yep, we're definitely going to be touching on some things with the receiving corps today. You're you're ahead of schedule. It's weird. I guess if I'm signed into my own account, it doesn't tell me if I'm on live. That's something new.
Yes, I did see it on my timeline, though.
Okay, perfect. Well, it's your host, Leo Luna of Tapped in Sports. As you guys probably see, I have a special guest with us today. It is Akash Anavarathan. And go ahead and tell everyone about yourself and just a little introduction.
What's up, man? First of all, thank you, Leo, for having me on. I appreciate you. And it's always good to, talk with different platforms that cover the 49ers. And so I write for Fourth and Nine here. I've been covering the team now for about 3 years. I've written for Niners Nation, 49ers Hub, and now I'm with Fourth and Nine sort of as their front man. So just excited. The team's really, really good, which makes it really exciting as a person that covers the team. Just because there's way more interaction, and it's just more fun to watch winning football. So,
absolutely, and thank you for joining my show as well. It's definitely much appreciated. Someone with your work joining here with me today. And the first thing that we're going to touch on here is something he's been able to write about and write about it well, is what makes the 49ers offense special through Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, the run game coordinator. We're going to go ahead and show you a couple plays that he has broke down extensively. And let's see what you saw on this one. This play here is Raheem Mostert. Obviously, not to take anything away from what he did, but this is a glaring hole. Tell me what you've seen when you were breaking down this play and what they do special to open up something that wide, because it's definitely a luxury for running backs when they're able to run through basically a parting C right there and just get as much yardage as possible.
Yeah, so this is from the NFC Championship game this year. As soon as Raheem Mostert made his trade request, which we'll kind of delve into later on in the show, a lot of fans started to immediately question whether another running back can be substituted into Kyle Shanahan's system and whether it can be kind of plug and play, right? And so the championship game was where Mostert kind of just ran wild, right? 220 yards. He had like the 4 touchdowns. It was his best game in the red and gold. And so now if you go back and look at the film, right, especially when you look at it in the all 22 angle from the end zones, you really see some of the big runs that Mostert had, just some of the gaping holes that are created by the 49ers, offensive line, as well as, the run game coordinator, Mike McDaniel. I think one of the big keys is they run a lot of 21 personnel. So 21 personnel, 2 running backs, 1 tight end type personnel. And by 2 running backs, ideally, one of them is fullback Kyle Juszczyk, who's a monster in the blocking game. The tight end, George Kittle, again, one of the best run blocking tight ends. And so you put that with the offensive line, and they're able to create holes like this. And kind of as you saw in the championship game, Green Bay's defense kind of tapped out as the game went on. And that's kind of the result you get here. And I, put together 4 or 5 screenshots just to show just the massive holes that Raheem Mostert was able to run through. This isn't, common for running backs to find this kind of space. And so that was kind of what led to that type of performance from Mostert. But, it's not to discredit Raheem Mostert, who fits Kyle Shanahan's system really, really well. He's that one cut and go type of running back who has the speed and the vision to be able to find that hole and explode. Kyle Shanahan hasn't found success in every single running back, and I think they have kind of the perfect marriage going here.
Yeah, and that's what I say is people kind of knock Raheem Mostert. Yes, I get it, guys. This is a big hole created by Kyle Shanahan right here in this photo. Yeah. But let's not forget, Carlos Hyde, he wasn't just putting up yardage and crazy yards per carry on the 49ers like Raheem Mostert did here. It's not like that came over from Washington that he had for a while. What's his name? 46. Alfred Morris. There we go.
Yeah.
Alfred Morris wasn't running through all this. Like these holes are great, and it's a great scheme, but we've seen photos of Trent Richardson, run into the wrong hole and leave holes this wide open. So it's great when you can produce holes this wide, but when you have running backs that actually hit those desired holes, that's kind of what made this mesh a hole for this 49ers defense, and that's where you saw the success that Raheem Mostert had.
Yep, it's definitely a combination, right? It's you can't just solely credit the offensive line or the design of the plays or Kyle Juszczyk or George Kittle. And at the same time, you just can't say it's all Raheem Mostert either, right? It's all of these pieces kind of working together that creates such a dynamic run game that made Mostert, the leader in yards per attempt, whether you use Football Outsiders DVOA or DR, all these advanced metrics has Raheem Mostert as one of the better running backs in the league, right? Significantly better than the other guys on the current roster, whether it's Tevin Coleman or Matt Breida.
Right. And the one who had the most, that was the closest to the yards per carry, was Matt Breida. But Matt Breida, he didn't run in between the tackles like Mostert did. Mostert's mainly a stretch zone guy, but you did see him run in between the tackles and go for touchdowns. It comes to mind against the LA Rams week 16 or against Seattle week 17, where you just see him squirt out and go into the end zone. So he's a guy that can still go in between the tackles, and Matt Breida, you didn't really see that. So he gave you all levels of the running back game. And the second play that we're going to show here is in the passing game. It's how unique. Just look at those routes here on a play action, and I'll let Akash go ahead and break this down because he's the one who did originally.
Yeah, so this offseason, just with the additional time as a result of quarantine and all that kind of stuff, I was like, let me delve a little bit more into Kyle Shanahan's passing concepts, right? And so this is one of his popular concepts that he developed, I think, when he was back with Houston as Gary Kubiak's offensive coordinator. It's the leak passing concept. So basically what this is based off of, there's Jimmy Garoppolo running play action with a running back, and they call it the play action part of it's called Wanda. It's just a stretch outside zone. And the biggest thing that you're looking for there is Marquise Goodwin in this play pretends to be a blocker on the backside here, but then kind of sneaks past the line of scrimmage and is wide open on the backside. Shanahan runs, a low cross and a crash route or an out route or whatever. Basically, he runs all the receivers to the other side of the field. So now your middle safety that's there deep is now shading that way, which leaves Marquise Goodwin just wide open. The beauty of this is, when the running game's striking, that's when Kyle Shanahan's able to use these type of passing concepts to really attack a defense. And there's tons of variations on this. I think I had like 3 or 4 examples of this play This time he runs it with Goodwin. They've ran it with Kendrick Bourne in the Redskins game. He was able to get a big play. They ran it in 2018 with George Kittle at
Right.
Seattle. They've run it with Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback leaking out of the backfield. So they've used the same kind of concept with multiple different players, and I think that's their biggest strength is they use the same look and they're able to come up with different outcomes.
Yeah, and it's crazy because the Shanahans, a lot of this does come from his father, and this has been a playbook that's been around for a long time. But usually, when you see that play happen, it works in success. I would say maybe 7 out of 10 times. This guy, Marquise Goodwin, in this case, when he leaked across, wide open. If anybody remembers this play, like didn't even get touched, standing there all by himself. It was a underthrown ball, and he basically was able to catch it like a punt, turn around and run it in. It's just crazy to see the success that this playbook has still going on, and Kyle Shanahan just adds his little wrinkles to make it even better each game and each season.
Right. Yeah, it's that responsibility of that corner that's at the bottom of the screen there to be able to watch for someone coming across, and just with the play action and kind of all the movement, they lose that receiver in sight, and so now Goodwin's running wide open, and the safety that's deep there just has to make a choice, and so more often than not, that leak route just ends up wide open, and it's an easy pass for the quarterback.
Right. Awesome. Perfect. We're going to go ahead and I saw we had a few comments in here. We're going to go ahead and touch on some of this a little later. But let's go ahead and get to this next one. It's something that I've seen. You got a little backlash on this, and I thought it was pretty hilarious. I think Kendrick Bourne, he found nothing of it. I think you send out a tweet a week later, or maybe an Instagram story a week later, and it was basically all love from him.
Yeah.
And the thing is, people see his workout videos and they want to say, oh, he's going to put up 1,000 yards. He's going to have a Pro Bowl year. He's going to become the superstar wide receiver. He's yet to eclipse 400 yards into a season. I think he's a hell of a player, hell of an athlete, and he does what the 49ers need him to do. But to say he's just going to go ahead and put up 1,000 yards, in my mind, seems unrealistic. And I think you thought the same on that. If you want to go ahead and touch base and let everyone know basically what happened there.
Yeah, so we'll start it off with a story. So I'm based out of Seattle. I was coming back to the Bay Area, and so I'm on the airplane. It's about to take off, and so I think it was like Quentin Patton, who was working out with the 49ers receivers in Tennessee, had told someone that he thought that Kendrick Bourne was going to hit 1,000 yards this season.
Right.
And obviously, Kendrick Bourne has been working out in Portland. He was working out at San Jose State, and then in Tennessee with Jimmy Garoppolo. So he's been posting a lot of content, and so people are constantly paying attention to him. Mm-hmm. And so when Quentin Patton said 1,000 yards for Kendrick Bourne, I was just like, okay, you guys got to pump the brakes on this, because there's a lot of talent in that receiving room. Kyle Shanahan likes to spread the ball around. Kendrick Bourne has 1,000 yards total in like 3 seasons, and I just don't think that's a realistic expectation. And obviously, I think he caught wind of it, replied back to it, and it was just a little fun banter. I've got nothing against Kendrick. Like I said, I think he fits this offense as like a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. He was fantastic on third down in the red zone this season. He was probably the Niners' best, receiver in those situations. But let's be honest, Brandon Ayuk and DEEBO Samuel are the team's 2 best receivers, right? I know Brandon Ayuk hasn't taken a snap, but they picked him in the first round. So the team hopes that he'll develop into one of the team's 2 best receivers. Then on top of that, you have Jalen Hurd, who they spent a 3rd-round pick on last season. If he's healthy, again, he's just athletically superior to Kendrick Bourne. He's going to play. They're going to move him all around the field. Kyle Shanahan's going to use him like a chess piece. Trent Taylor, who in 2017 had more snaps, catches, and yards than Kendrick Bourne. Again, if he's healthy after 5 foot surgeries, he's probably going to play more than Kendrick Bourne. So that's 4 guys right there that are going to get more opportunities, and that's not even factoring in George Kittle, who's their biggest receiving threat. So when you just kind of factor all that, I don't think he's going to reach 1,000 yards. Realistically, you'd think, 500 yards, 600 yards, somewhere in that realm is a great year for Kendrick Bourne. The other thing I had said in that tweet was, I don't anticipate that he's on the team in 2021, partially because, he's the highest paid receiver right now on the team. He's making $3.3 million on the second round tender.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be a free agent next season. And, I think he's going to price himself out of the 49ers range, who have a ton of free agents.
Yep.
And, they've got young receivers who are under contract on the roster, and I think they can just replace his production at a lower cost. So those were the two things I thought. It just comes with the territory. So, but totally respect Kendrick Bourne's game.
Absolutely.
And his hard, his work ethic and all that kind of stuff. Just don't think that 1,000 yards is totally realistic.
Yeah, it's not that easy as people think. Got a comment here from Luis. If anything, I'd rather have KB score 10 plus touchdowns as opposed to 1,000 yards. And I think we would all prefer that as well, as to see him score 10 plus touchdowns. And I think that's something he can do. I think he asserted himself as the red zone target. Teams are obviously going to double team Kittle in that situation, and I think Kyle has schemed it that way, to where we didn't see Kittle have these big touchdown seasons to go along with his yardage. And how I like to break things down a lot of the times is like real world circumstances. This is kind of sort of in that way, but it has to do with car sales. Because there's a lot of variables within car sales as well. I've done it before, so that's how I know, unfortunately. But it's like a guy, he has been doing, say, months instead of seasons. Months. Mm-hmm. He's just done 3 cars, and say the 1,000-yard season is 10 cars. So to say he's going to jump from 3 cars to 10 cars is very, unrealistic based on what he did before. Can it happen? Of course. But there is multiple variables that go into that. The customers he's working with, do they have the credit score to get approved for the car? The customers that he's also working with, are they just looking? They're not necessarily buyers. There's variables that go into that in order to hit that number. Same thing with Kendrick Bourne. There's variables of how many targets a game is he going to get, variables of DEEBO Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, someone who they traded up and gave up draft capital for. And like you touched, Jalen Hurd, he's a guy who still has 3 seasons under contract with the team, and he could do a little more than what Kendrick Bourne can in athletic ability. I do believe this is Kendrick Bourne's last season with the Niners. I think he will out-price tag himself if he puts up the season he did last year, even though it's not crazy yardage, but 500 yards with 6-7 touchdowns is a big year in my mind for Kendrick Bourne. I don't think he necessarily has to have that 1,000-yard season. And when it comes to replacing what he can do based off athletic ability, but brings a little more YAG, I think Juwan Jennings could fill that
that's a name too
for Kendrick Bourne in 2021, if that is something that they deem to do moving forward.
Yeah, I think, on Kendrick Bourne, just 2 things. So, he had the big 3rd and 16 play against the Rams, week 16 at Levi's, right? Kyle Shanahan spoke to us after the game, and one of the biggest takeaways, about Kendrick that everyone in the building loves is his, ability to block out kind of the magnitude of the moment. He has this kind of childlike personality where the magnitude doesn't really impact him, and he doesn't get tight in big spots, which is big for a receiver to have in, outside of that Seattle game early in the season where he had a few drops. He had, I don't think he had any drops outside of that game. And so he's constantly reliable. He comes up big in, on 3rd down and big spots where the team needs him. So credit to him in those areas. I just think the expectations just got way out of hand, just because fans were so accustomed to seeing him, on our Twitter timelines and Instagram and all that kind of stuff, just because he was constantly bombarding us with workout videos. Yeah.
So a realistic expectation, I don't see 1,000 yards like some people want to say, but if he does happen some way, somehow get 1,000 yards, I'm going to be all for it, and I'm going to say great for him. I would love it. So
Yeah, I followed up in a subsequent tweet and I said if he gets 1,000 yards, it probably means that Deebo Samuel's like hurt for most of the season, or Ayuk didn't flash, or there has to be something above him on the depth chart that would have had to happen for him to get to 1,000 yards. So, which probably isn't a good thing. So,
Exactly. I'm on there with you. And then since we're touching base on the receiving core, I know it was kind of a hot topic here by everybody. Is Peter King recently came out, and I think it should be noted he does have some connections with the 49ers. He's not a guy that's just speaking out of the side of his neck.
No.
He was that first season with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Peter King was in that war room, which war rooms like gold. They're not just letting anybody in there.
Yeah.
So the fact that Peter King basically said Deebo Samuel could be sidelined for a month into October, that may be something that the 49ers within the front office feel like is a possibility or a reality. Which receiver would you like to see step up in his absence? And do you believe that there is some truth behind it, that despite what Deebo says that he's going to be out there, do you believe that there's some truth behind that?
Yeah, I mean, so originally when Deebo Samuel was injured, Ian Rappaport came up with the 12 to 16 week timeline, right? And the thing with Jones fractures is you'd rather be safer and make sure that it's completely healed rather than coming back on it early to allow for the injury to like linger longer. So you want to make sure he's completely healed before he steps foot on the field. And so originally the 12 to 16 week timeline was somewhere mid-September, early October, somewhere in that time frame. Mm-hmm. And Deebo shot back. I think he said he was going to try to be there opening day. And so personally, I think I would lean that he, comes back somewhere in that 12 to 16 week time frame. Looking at the 49ers schedule, they open with the Cardinals at home. A familiar opponent. I think Kyle Shanahan and his offensive staff have the advantage over Vance Joseph. Then they go to New York. They've got the Jets and Giants on back-to-back weeks. Not opponents that if the 49ers were like playoff contenders that they should be worried about. So the first 3 weeks of the season, they could probably get by without having Deebo Samuel, right? So I would, be if I was Kyle Shanahan, I'd be a little bit more cautious. Make sure that he's completely healthy before bringing him back. As to who can step up, ideally that would be Brandon Ayuk, right? During the draft process, Brandon Ayuk was viewed as Deebo Samuel light, someone that you can kind of move between the X, the Z, the F. You can move him, across the field. He's a yak threat, right? Get him the ball in space and let him, make magic. But the thing is, he's a rookie. And Kyle Shanahan has an extremely complex playbook. Deebo Samuel often, told us that it took him, the majority of the season working with Emmanuel Sanders and Kendrick Bourne to really grasp that playbook. And so it's going to be tough for Ayuk to get up to speed, especially with no rookie mini camp, a limited training camp, no preseason. It's hard to expect him of that. So I would expect one of the older guys that are on the roster, whether it's a Jalen Hurd, whether it's a Trent Taylor, whether it's Kendrick Bourne, one of those guys to like step up in his absence. But like I said, easy schedule, easy-ish relatively, right, out of the gate. So if you were to miss time, it won't be the worst thing in the world. You'd really want him healthy for that stretch in the middle where they go like to New England, they come back to Seattle, then they come home, they have Green Bay. There's like 4 or 5 games in there that's brutal. So you'd want Deebo Samuel healthy and firing for those games.
Yeah, and I'm on the same page with you. I wouldn't necessarily want Deebo Samuel to come back prematurely and then have him miss those Green Bay games, the Seattle games. It's just go ahead and those teams, I believe it's the Cardinals, the Giants, the Jets, and they do have an Eagles one, but their defense has a lot of question marks. But they did do some upgrades at least. But with those 3 out of the 4, at least before the Eagles, those are games they could win on the run. They don't necessarily have to throw 30 times a game, 25 times a game. And if it is someone to step up, I would like this comment here by Luis, I would love to see Jalen Hurd
That would be awesome. Yeah.
step up, because I believe he's the most Debo-like receiver. Between how he runs so aggressively and with his routes, they're pretty precise, and he could go up and get the ball.
Right.
As you know, before the season started, the talk wasn't Debo. The talk was Jalen Hurd, that he was
Yep.
the best looking receiver in camp. Him and Trent Taylor, actually.
Yeah.
Debo wasn't even on,
He
being
wasn't on the
mentioned.
radar, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't on the radar. It wasn't until the season came around, and then we saw him. I believe his first big game was the Bengals one. Then we were like,
Yep.
okay, Debo is that dude. And so I believe Jalen Hurd, I would not be shocked if he just came out with his hair on fire.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing with Hurd is we just haven't seen him play, right? And so,
Right.
especially with a limited training camp, with no preseason games, we'll have absolutely no idea what to expect from Hurd when he shows up week one.
Right. And we have a comment here from Richard. It says, "Do you gentlemen know why Shanahan likes Coleman so much? He seemed to poorly find holes many times." I'll touch first on this. Coleman seemed to be kind of that grunt worker. He got all the dirty work done, and got that defensive line pretty tired. The linebackers pretty tired. He wasn't busting out, long runs or anything. But when Mostert did come in, he was seeing a more exhausted defense than a fresh one like Coleman did. And he knows this offense really well between the pass block schemes, and I think that's the benefit behind Coleman, not so much of being like a Mostert type running back. But I do believe someone you interviewed, Jeff Wilson, I believe he could fill that hole and not miss Coleman so much.
Yeah, I mean, I was hard on Coleman. He was probably the worst running back that the 49ers had out of that three, right? Out of Mostert, Coleman, and Breida. But Shanahan really loves pass catching running backs, right? That allows him to be
Right.
versatile. That allows him to move that running back kind of outside and then potentially bring him back in. And it just allows for him to call any type of play. And that's something that Mostert and Breida don't necessarily offer. So,
Right.
Shanahan tends to lean on Coleman for that kind of stuff, especially with Jerick McKinnon being hurt. Jerick McKinnon would have filled that void, but he obviously wasn't there. So I think that's why he leans that way. Coleman was also first in the NFL in facing eight men in the box. I think he faced it like about 40% of his snaps. So he was,
Yes.
he was mostly the early down rusher that faced a lot of, loaded boxes. So he's running against just tougher defenses. And yeah, he definitely did struggle to find the hole, as you alluded. His stats, yards per attempt, that kind of thing, don't pale in comparison to Mostert. But Shanahan doesn't necessarily have like a bell cow. It's a balanced sort of running back by committee type thing. And so that's part of it.
And I could see Shanahan being like that for a while. To be strictly honest, I don't necessarily see them going in the draft in the next 2 to 3 years trying to find a bell cow, because what he has been doing has been working. So why spend an early pick on how they like to look at, especially in a Shanahan scheme, replaceable position?
Yep, and just like you mentioned, they've got Jeff Wilson Jr., who arguably might have been their best pass catching threat. Had a couple big touchdowns early on in the season. Had that huge game winner against Arizona. He's coming back. He understands the system. They've added JaMychal Hasty and Salvon Ahmed, undrafted free agents this season, and so there might be a huge turnover in this running back room. Just considering, Jerick McKinnon's a free agent at the end of the season. Tevin Coleman's a free agent. Breida's gone, so some new faces probably coming soon.
Right. And as well as I believe Jeff Wilson, he'll be easier to retain, but he'll still be a restricted free agent.
Yep.
And that's never a guarantee to return.
Yeah, and I'm sure they won't tender him super high, just considering he hasn't, played as much as Breida or Bourne, who were both second round tenders. And so, yeah.
And now it's into the juicy part of the conversation. It's basically what everybody wants to hear. You wrote a piece on this recently and broke it down with the former scout. But it's basically the extension regarding Kittle. I believe there's multiple variables to go on with it, with COVID, revenue stream. I'll let you go ahead and touch on it, and then let me know when you want me to throw up these contract numbers that you you designed out for him.
Yeah. So basically, about a month ago, I spoke with Joel Corey. He was a former NFL agent. Now he writes for CBS Sports. And so I was like very curious on how this George Kittle negotiation was going. Right. The biggest thing that Kittle's trying to accomplish is he's trying to transcend positional pay. So historically in the NFL, you get paid based on the position that you play. Right. And George Kittle being a tight end. Tight ends, one of these positions is not valued very much, right? Austin Hooper currently has the highest tight end contract ever, and his average is like $10.5 million a year, and his guaranteed money is like 18, 19 million, something like that. So, it'll be easy for Kittle to trump that contract, but Kittle obviously wants to get paid more like a wide receiver, right? He wants to get paid like a Julio Jones or Amari Cooper or Michael Thomas, because a lot of the stats, his receiving stats, pale in comparison to those guys. And he's saying that, hey, I'm also one of the best blockers as a tight end. So you should, be able to pay me like the combination of like a tackle and a receiver, right? Because essentially that's what I do. But again, that's not how it works in the NFL, right? And the beauty of that is it's because it's the franchise tag. So, Kittle and his camp can come in asking for wide receiver money, and the 49ers don't have to budge just because, George Kittle's under contract this year at, $2.2 million.
Right.
And say they don't come to an extension. They'll just put the franchise tag on him, which I think this year's $10.6 million, which is a very fair number for George Kittle, under market value, I'd say.
Yeah.
And say they don't come to an agreement then they come back the next year, they can franchise him again at 120% of that salary. So it'd be about $13 million. So basically you get George Kittle at, for the next 3 years, like under market value, right? And so that's where the 49ers leverage comes into play. They're saying we could basically, retain your rights over the next couple of years at these prices. So we'll meet you in the middle a little bit. We'll tack on some extra cash, but we're not going to come up to $17-18 million a year annually, the kind of numbers that some of these other receivers are expecting. So it makes things more complicated. The other thing is, Kittle being a 5th round pick, he's only accrued 3 seasons so far in the NFL. So this would be his 4th season. You need 4 accrued seasons to be an unrestricted free agent per the CBA. So say he were to come into camp and say that, hey, I'm going to hold out, right? As soon as he misses that first day of training camp, I believe, he loses the rights for the accrued season, even if he shows up the rest of the year, which would make him a restricted free agent at the end of the year. So it complicates things a whole lot, right? And on top of that, he's getting fined like $40,000 a day. And he's only made, I think, like $1.9 million so far, in his career. Right. So financially, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense for him to hold out. And CBA-wise, there's not, many loopholes or any of this stuff for him to just hold out and force the 49ers front office to come and pay him, right? So Parag Marathe, John Lynch, all these guys, they can kind of, hold, steady on their number, whatever that is, $13-14 million annually over 4 years, and they can just wait for Kittle to make the concessions, if he wants an extension. And that's up to George Kittle's camp, right? Does he want the long-term security this season in case of an injury or something like that? Or is he willing to play out his contract, and then try to hit free agency in a couple seasons? I think that's the way for him to maximize his value. If he stays healthy, if he keeps playing at an all-pro level, then yes, if he doesn't sign an extension now, he's going to get significantly more money in a year or two. But is he willing to risk it? I'm just not sure. So
yeah,
that's what complicates it. And like you mentioned, the other thing is what's the salary cap going to be, right? So with COVID and the revenue stream, how's this going to work out? So right now the salary cap set at $200 million or $198 million. How it works is the league takes all their total revenues, and somewhere between 48 and 49% of that pool is what's set aside for the salary cap. So they take basically half of the total revenues, then they split it up 32 ways, and they say, here, that's the salary cap. Well, this season, with no fans and all that other stuff that's going to happen, the revenues are going to be down. So naturally, the salary cap's probably going to dip as well, or maybe they'll smooth the cap. Or I know that's part of the negotiations that are ongoing. So that also plays an impact, right? For the 49ers to be able to construct a contract for George Kittle and for George Kittle's camp to figure out, what he's worth, they got to know kind of what the total pie is, right? And so with that being in flux and just all that at play, it makes this negotiation extremely complex, and a lot of fans would just want to simplify this to like one number, which is an average annual value, and it's just way beyond that right now. And I think most fans would like to see him get extended before the season begins. I just don't know how realistic that is. I think George Kittle bets on himself and says, let me play out the season and, another all-pro season, and then suddenly becomes more valuable. But, just because the other two top tight ends, whether it's Zach Ertz or whether it's Travis Kelce, right, those guys haven't been signed to giant deals. So George Kittle doesn't have like a launch pad to say, okay, Travis Kelce has
exactly
pay me why, right? He's basing his contract off like Austin Hooper, who he's better than, but Austin Hooper's deal is just not very good. So he's kind of a tough. Yeah,
it's so tough, like trying to negotiate this contract as a tight end, and with Kittle, he's right to ask for the money.
Yep,
he's someone that blocks like a tackle. They're basically their biggest passing plays of the season where they needed yards. He's their best pass catcher, and they had to sit him down and block and use him as a blocker because he's that elite at blocking. On top of that, he's damn near uncoverable, especially when he's breaking inside or outside. And Jimmy Garoppolo does a good job to put that in the perfect spot to where he could gain yards after catch, because that's his best ability as a receiver. And similar to the Saints game, in any other different location where that ball is, he probably might not even go off to that big crazy run to win that football game. And it's just so difficult. I'm hearing that he may want around 15 or so, and that's just all he wants. I don't think that's what he's saying right now, because I think that's where he wants to land. And as you know, in negotiations, you don't say where you want to land, because that team's always going to go under that number.
Right. So, I'm sure he came in, $17-18 million. The 49ers probably came in at like 10 or 11, and now they're kind of inching, towards each other. And, the 49ers want to keep him, right?
Yeah.
He's face of the franchise, best player. He's sort of he's like a Kyle Shanahan handpicked player, just fits this offense perfectly. It's a matter of just getting the numbers to work, right?
Right.
And so, the 49ers have probably one of the 4 or 5 best front offices in terms of setting up contracts, setting up deals with outs in them after a couple of years that don't bury them, right? Not with, limited dead money, all that kind of stuff. And so they hold firm to whatever their numbers are, and they trust that type of a process. So I think they're going to continue to do that. They're going to hold firm with kind of the contract offers that they've presented George Kittle, wherever that is, right? 13 million, 14 million, 15 million, whatever. And they're going to allow Kittle's camp to essentially come down to that number. And, again, he's going to be the highest paid tight end, right? He's going to get the most guaranteed money of any tight end. I just don't think he's going to get receiver money. So,
and I think that's interesting that you brought up how they break down their contracts, because Kittle, I don't know. Like, I don't see him a guy getting cut in his contract. He's just that great of a player, although injuries are unforeseen.
He's also going to be 27 going into this season, right? I think he turns 27 October. So he's not like, normally rookies getting their extension, you'd think they're 24, 25, something like that. No, Kittle's about to be 27. So if you were to give him like a 4-year deal at the end of that, he's probably like 30, 31. So, yeah.
Right. And something I thought about Kittle long term, like the way he plays, so aggressive after the catch, like that's not something that's necessarily going to hold up long term. And he's going to have to make those business decisions to where it's like, I may have to step out of bounds here. I may just have to go down here, because that's the older you get, especially he's going into his age 27 season, yet to receive that big contract. You don't want them to say, well, you just hurt this, so now we're going to bump it down $1 million, or we're going to bump down the guarantees $5 million. So it's definitely a tricky situation for Kittle. I believe if he wants 17, pay him 17. At the end of the day, it's not my money, and it's not my salary cap that I have to, work through in every single day of the year. But what he offers Nobody in the league offers that. So it's not
Wow.
someone that you could just replace easy. And something that over with me, Grant Cohn, yeah, he makes crazy takes all the time, but he's a great mentor at the end of the day.
Love Grant.
But yeah, he brought up something interesting to where it's if they just did two tight ends, one that's elite at receiving, one that's elite at blocking, and that's maybe why they took Charlie Warner and see if he could offer similar blocking skills. I don't see why you would want to take up two roster spots when you could just pay one guy. Like if you're paying two guys, say your receiver's contract's going to come up, you got to pay him that 10 million. Then you're gonna typical blockers going to make about 3 million. So now you're paying 13 millions for two players, taking it up an extra roster spot when you just pay about 2 million more and have George Kittle.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes back to the 49ers kind of fundamental, financial strategy, which is they don't overpay guys, right? The one guy that kind of threatened that was DeForest Buckner, who had demands of, $20 million a year, $60 million guaranteed, all this kind of stuff. They traded him for a first-round pick, right? Historically, you look at the deals that they've handed out. Jimmy Garoppolo, I'd say under market value, right? Especially this past season.
Yeah.
Eric Armstead, right? Just they get guys on either discounts or they get guys where there's like significant guarantees in like year 1, year 2, and then year 3, it's essentially you can cut them and not incur any dead money. So
like D Ford,
right? Exactly, like D Ford,
Alexander.
Yep, exactly. Mm-hmm. So George Kittle again is posing a threat to that because again he's worth whatever he's asking. But are the 49ers going to drastically reset the market and double whatever Austin Hooper got? I just don't see that, right, as realistically happening. They'll probably just say, hey, we'll just franchise tag you.
Well, let's show everyone what you do see happening and show that this is a mock contract that you went ahead and broke down, and if you want to go ahead and explain that there.
Yeah, so this is based off of Over the Cap. So I spend a lot of time on Over the Cap now, especially around like free agency time. It's super interesting because it's a tool that allows you to play with all the different variables that go into creating a contract. There's more than this, obviously, but just for people that cover the team. So basically, what I've outlined is a 4-year extension here that has Kittle with the team through 2024, which would be his age 31 season. It's a $58 million total value. So that's an average, annual value of $14.5 million, which, probably under what Kittle wanted. It's probably over what the 49ers were willing to give him. But again, you got to meet in the middle, right? So,
exactly.
That would be the average annual value. I went ahead and said $32 million in total guarantees, and then $22 million upfront in a signing bonus. So how this contract breaks down? So that $22 million signing bonus, basically, it gets paid up front in like the first calendar year, but from salary cap purposes, it's actually prorated over the length of the contract. So they take the $22 million and you divide it basically by the 5 years, right? This year and then the next 4 years. So that stuff's all guaranteed, regardless if you cut him at any point. That money is dead money. It counts against the cap no matter what. Then I went ahead and set the base salaries, right? So for 2021, 22, 23, 24. So typically the 49ers like to do base salaries that kind of increase over time. So I said, okay, let's just do 6 million base salary, then 8 over the next 2 years, and then 12 in his final season. And then there's a portion of the base salaries are guaranteed. So this means that if you're on the roster April 1st, that portion of the salary becomes guaranteed. So I said, okay, in 21, 22, and 23, let's guarantee some portion of the salary, and the remainder of it gets paid out, if he's on the roster. And then in 24, let's not guarantee any of the salary. So basically 24, if you see, is a cuttable year, I guess. The dead money is about $4.5 million, but you could save about $12.5 million in cap space. So the cap numbers are very reasonable. $7 million in cap this year. I think his cap number right now is like around 3. So the 49ers have the space.
2.
2. Yeah, you're right. So they have the space to accommodate that. And then again, 11 million, then 13, then 13. So very reasonable cap hits, kind of how I have it structured. I've also given him a $500,000 roster bonus, which essentially is, every game that he's active, he gets like a $32,500, something like that. So Joel Corey, who I spoke with, he said the 49ers are one of the best at handing out roster bonuses and workout bonuses and things like that,
Right.
rather than, just guaranteeing the cash up front as a base salary. Because now, say Kittle misses a couple games, you get that cash back, right? So,
It's funny
not
hearing
player
that.
friendly, but very team friendly.
It's funny hearing that from a former agent because those are not the negotiations he
He
loved to
hated
do.
it.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. No, he was like, it's brutal, right? Because they put forth all these like roster bonuses and workout bonuses and incentives, and it's like, as a player agent, you're just looking for guaranteed money, right? Especially in the NFL.
Yeah.
And so it's really difficult to get that because a lot of the times Niners hold leverage like they do in this situation, and so you're forced almost into signing these type of contracts.
Yeah, like for me, like I'm a fan, but I also see from the business side of things first. Like I look at that. I look at Cap way before being a fan. But with Kittle, he's one of those unique players. Why don't you just guarantee 13 million every single year? Make it fully guaranteed 13 million.
Yeah.
Like that as a fan, that wouldn't bother me because like I said, he's not a guy that's going to get cut in his contract. He's not a guy that you're worried about that's not going to perform at least $13 million a year. Like, he plays through injuries. Even if he's hurt, he plays through it and plays at an elite level. Like, look what he did against the Arizona Cardinal Thursday night game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was able still to break off tackles against a Pro Bowl safety in Budda Baker and run into the end zone. Like, he could play at elite level hurt. Injuries don't really concern me with him. The only time it would is if he just kept playing the way he does and just takes many, many, many hits within his career.
Yeah, no, I mean, from a fan's perspective, the fans that have been, saying pay George Kittle and all this kind of stuff, totally agree where they're coming from, right? They're looking at it as they've been rooting for this guy for 3 years. He's, the best player on their team, so they want him to get paid so that he's with the team, right? But,
exactly.
Me looking at it from the team perspective, the market, sets the value, right? In my opinion, it's a supply demand type thing. And so, when the market says, these players are worth 10, 11, 12 million dollars, you don't go paying, a player of that position 17, 18 million dollars. It just doesn't make sense, right?
And here's another reason why you don't as well, because then you're going to piss off a lot of other teams. You're going to piss off a lot of GMs. You're going to piss off a lot of owners. And when there are players available, they may just write you off and say, no, we don't want to do business with them because now we just had to pay our tight end $15 million instead of paying them 10.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you set a bad precedent with your players as well, right? Because you're saying, hey, I'll go way over the market to pay my own guy. And so, yeah, exactly. Think Fred Warner, or think Mike McGlinchey, or think, Trent Williams, who's about to be a free agent, or Nick Bosa when that contract rolls out 3 years down the line, right? What is he going to expect? So, again, teams have to be wary of this kind of stuff when they set up a contract for Kittle. It's not just Kittle. It's also like all these other factors. So, Parag's one of the best in the game. He's about to work magic now that the team has talent, and all these contracts and deals coming up. He's the Buckner stuff came out of the blue, and so I think they've got these things planned out kind of years in advance. And so it's a little short-sighted for us to just say, okay, hey, pay him 18, pay him 17, pay him whatever he wants, when I think they've got a number, and I think they're going to stick to it.
Yeah, I believe so. It's hashtag pay George Kittle, but pay him at the definitely amount that is team friendly.
Yeah, and don't pay him too much.
Yeah, don't over the franchise. It's say a bag of chips. That's the last bag of chips in stock, and I want that bag of chips. I'm gonna pay say $3.50 for it, $4, whatever chips cost. I'm not gonna go and pay that bag of chips $12. Like, sorry. So. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining the show. Thank you for everybody viewing in. Definitely look forward to having you again and talking more Niner football. It's definitely a blessing.
No, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me on. It was fun. We got to do this again.
Certainly. Thank you, guys.